You're listening to WASTOIDS.
From cult horror and sci-fi to B-movie splatterfests, to underground music documentaries, concert films, public access shows, indie label showcases, and original programs, Night Flight Plus is the coolest place online for weird and riveting viewing. Right now, WASTOIDS listeners can get $10 off an annual membership. That means access to Night Flight's library for only $29.99 a year. Head to www.nightflightplus.com/promo code and enter WASTOIDS in all caps. That's WASTOIDS. Enter promo code WASTOIDS at nightflightplus.com/promo code and get back in the days.
This is WASTOIDS. This is WASTOIDS. This is WASTOIDS.
Hello everybody, it's the Spindle podcast with Mark and John.
Hi and welcome to The Spindle, a podcast about 7-inch records. I'm Mark.
I'm John.
And in each episode we talk about one 7-inch record and hopefully give you some insight into it that you haven't heard before. So we both got into music in the 80s and 90s when 7 inches were super important, especially on independent labels. So that's the era we mostly draw from, but we pick stuff earlier or later than that too, sometimes. Either way, we'll try to keep it short and to the point just like 7 inches do. So on this episode, we are going to talk about Flipper's, I think Love Canal's the A-side, right? Love Canal, backed with Ha Ha Ha.
This is a double A side if I ever heard one.
That's what and so it's released in 1981 on Subterranean/Thermidor Records in Berkeley, California. Reissued a couple of years later on Alternative Tentacles. It was recorded on October 31st of that year I think it's actually 1980. I'm sorry, I said 81, but I think it's 80. And let's see, the band was Bruce. At that point, he was called Bruce Lose, which he later
just switch back and forth all the time.
To Bruce Loose, yeah.
Loose or lose.
Yeah, well, he's the singer.
But it's what's funny about that is now that I say that is it's also the Johnny Thunderstone would go back and forth between Born to Lose or Born Too Loose. He would.
Oh. I didn't know
There's
that.
a reference, but there you go.
Cool. So he was the singer. The bassist was Will Shatter, Ted Falcone on guitar, and Steve DePace on drums. This is essentially their first set. I guess they were on like a comp before this, but this is their first official release, I guess, right? Yeah, and I mean, I first heard them in the late '80s, and I've always liked them, but I don't know a ton about them. So maybe you can give some context for what was happening in the Bay Area when they.
Sure, yeah. Well, they were. It's funny because they were always painted as the band everybody supposedly hated, but really everybody loved them. They were great. They wrote great songs, and they found this really awesome scene between being punk and not punk and something else that was weirdly avant and yet super listenable. Like you can put them on at parties and nobody will complain. Like they sound great. They sound gnarlier than they are. And they have this beautiful doomed romantic heart at the center of them. You know, those lyrics that are so literary, it's just really just a great idea. They knocked it out of the park. It's a shame they were so fucked up all the time.
Right.
But but I mean, how many records do you need? They made like 2, really 3 if you count some of the live stuff. Classic, unbelievable records. Now I heard Ha 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 probably like a lot of people on Let Them Eat Jelly Beans, which came out.
Oh, okay. Right. That makes sense. The Alternative Tentacles comp.
Which is Alternative Tentacles comp, which just really I'm sure a lot of people that blew a lot of people's heads open, because that was like transition from sort of going from being into punk new wave to digging into the underground, and so that connection where it had circle jerks but also weirder stuff. But Love Canal is a really important song too. I mean, Ha 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 should be the national anthem. That's one of the great songs in the American songbook, in my opinion. It's dumb and smart and fun and hilarious and absolutely on point all at the same time. And just, I don't know that you could make a more perfect song or recording. I don't know that humanity has ever reached a pinnacle any higher.
Wow. That's pretty awesome. What do you think is the POV? What's the point there? Do you think that they're
the point?
Yeah.
The point is to mock human pretension at emotion while admitting that indeed you need it, and it's hilarious, the contrast between the two things.
That seems right.
I don't have the lyrics right in front of me.
Yeah. Isn't life a blast? It's just like living in the past.
And
then all this stuff about suburbia and shopping.
You go downtown to your laundry and shopping in suburbia. And I said, ha, 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 ha. Yeah. They went on down to that cheap motel and they got all gushy and wet.
Right. So I guess I'm looking at this. So Bruce wrote those lyrics, and then the Love Canal was written by Shatter. But they seem like
when at least when I saw them live, what was revealed is usually the person who wrote the words sang the words, and the other person played the bass. But I don't know that always held. I mean, I will say that Bruce tended to sing more than Will, but they would switch back and forth a lot. Maybe it was 2/3 Bruce, 1/3 Will.
I mean, sort of the perception I had of them when I first heard them, and so I think probably some people telling me about them too, is like, "Ooh, it's so weird that a punk band played slower." But I mean, do you think that was that weird at the time for them to have songs that weren't fast?
I don't know. I mean, everybody loved them. That's the thing. It's like, it was hilarious. They're the band everybody loved to hate, to pretend to hate, I guess. And so, yeah, they played slow, but not really that slow. And there were plenty of other bands playing slow. Not everybody played like MDC. Everybody played pretty eclectically. There was a little branding, I think, with them being at war with the scene. Now, there were, if I read personal histories of what was going on with Flipper, within their little world, those are very, a couple of those guys were really confrontational people, or had, issues and difficult lives for various reasons at that point. But as a band, no, they were just hugely popular. Like they were huge. I mean, comparatively, they were really big. I mean, they sold a lot of records, probably. That generic record. There's a lot of those around. Like, those records did pretty well. I mean, they never became huge. I don't mean to imply that, but within that world, they were pretty significant, influential. I think people like the songwriting. Love Canal is a great example, though. But Love Canal is a great example that this single is like an awesome example of what made Flipper great. So once how you have Ha Ha Ha, which is, well, only smart people can make dumb fun like that. But the other side, that's just a cry. That is just absolute, like, somebody just pouring their heart out over something horrible. It's like disgust. There's no sarcasm in that song. There's no ironic distance. It's like, look at what's going. This is horrible. What's happening to these people? Like, there's no joke. I mean, it's kind of the idea that the name Love Canal is the only joke, really, in the thing.
Right.
Because that's the actual name of the place that they're singing about, because that was tied to basically an industrial poisoning and high levels of industrial waste in a town called Love Canal in New York.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't know that.
So it's like a real thing. It was contemporary with the single. And so this was an early case of people getting kind of up in arms over industrial waste, poisoning people like that, causing birth defects and cancers and things. Wow. And so the song's related to that.
Read the lyrics and you haven't heard the song, it's
you have read some of those lyrics.
Well, great. So it's like, Our bodies are breaking down. We're breeding. Our children look like monsters. We're breeding. Poison is killing our every cells. We are bitter. Poison killing our very cells. We are dying. It's like
hilarious.
Yeah.
And but I mean, it's moving. Like
it is.
You know, it reminds me of that song "I Come and Stand at Every Door," which is the song about the kid from Hiroshima. Mm-hmm. Like since I burned to death in Hiroshima, I'm frozen in this age, haunting the planet. Mm-hmm. It sort of reminds me of that a little bit.
Oh wow, yeah. I mean, it almost has like a Cronenberg kind of. It's somewhere in between like sheer pain and almost like monster movie. I don't even know, monster like horror film kind of.
The mutation seizing on the mutation aspect of it is very
cool.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's fantastic, and they're great lyrics. They're well written.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's amazing that you can get that kind of feeling through. I me's very direct. I mean, you know, it's not easy necessarily to write that directly.
Yeah. And it's funny when he sings the Love Canal part. There's at least parts of the song where it sounds like there's something on the vocals, like the la, and there's
they're using a delay-ish kind of
thing. A pedal maybe.
Yeah. Well, they do all that kind of stuff. Like on Sex Bomb, they have that snare thing that goes pew.
Yeah.
The second record, there's tons of stuff like that, like reverbs, and
I really like using it sort of so sparingly too, like. Because at first the song sounds like almost like they just recorded it live, which they probably did the pedal effect live too, but still just to have that sort of second layer come in when everything is so raw up to then is pretty awesome.
That's such a great groove too, that song. Like so good.
Totally.
Ted Falcone, a word for Ted Falcone, who's an amazing guitarist. Like nobody can play like Ted Falcone. It's like this very particular way he plays. Like it reminds me a bit of Jad Fair, but it's not. It's like I'm sure he had no awareness of Jad Fair when I think it just make as much noise as possible. And so he has this very distinctive way of playing where strings are constantly going, and he'll like instead of like closing the chord, you know, hitting the chord and then strumming the guitar kind of thing, he's constantly strumming the guitar and then closing the chords onto the neck and then opening the fingers and just like crank, crank like that up and down the neck, and is really expert at it. Like it's a thing. Like it's like, you know, he's got it all sculpted. Just insane to watch. That's like awesome. A one man. He's like this orchestra.
That's cool. And I guess he was a Vietnam vet. I didn't really know until I read about them today. But
like I said, it's an interesting bunch of personalities.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a Vietnam vet and very serious kind of guy. They were fun live, though.
I'm sure. I mean, it's funny because one of the things I always kind of perceived about them, or someone told me, or I don't know how I got this perception, was that they're sort of taking the piss out of serious music. But it's not like their songs are jokes either, so it's sort of, you know.
It's great. They had their cake and ate it too. Only a couple of people get to do that. And you know, because they did the show I saw here with them was hilarious. They were either incredibly terrible or absolutely transcendent. They were like Bruce was so drunk he was like spent at least a third of the set in the fetal position with his head on the monitor, facing down. And not doing anything as far as I could tell. At one point we poked him and he didn't move. And he got up and they did like this insane version of That's the Way of the World, like one of the most transcendent live performances I've ever seen. Wow. Like I'm standing right under them, you know, and I'm like, what the hell, you know? And then the song finished and it was just back to what they were doing before, mumbling around, falling down on the stage, drinking beer. So
when was this?
84 or something like that.
Wow.
930 Club, the old 930 Club. That place was packed. Everybody was. This is what I'm saying. It's like everybody loved them. You know, they were beloved, and it's kind of like that. You know, you pretend to hate them. That's part of the shtick.
Right.
Because everybody hates them and heckles them, and aren't they terrible? But everybody's there. Everybody loves them. Everybody buys their records, and they never made a bad record. I mean, even their recent stuff is good.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? Well, it's whatever you need it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships or at work or not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better, because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. As a special offer to WASTOIDS listeners, you can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/wastoids. That's betterhelp.com/wastoids. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode.
Well, it's funny because there was one, I think it was Steve DePace I was reading an interview. He's like, people started calling us the Grateful Dead of punk, which is
I don't know.
really ridiculous.
I don't know about that.
I think he's exaggerating there, but
I think maybe. Okay, I don't know what kind of lines. I have to admit, I don't know what kind of lines were drawn in 1979 San Francisco, which was a hell of a scene.
Right.
So I'm talking more broadly nationally.
Sure,
By the time I found out about them in 81 or 82 in that area there, they were well established and just kicking ass.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Grateful Dead thing is sort of this reference to this perception that why are they playing so long and slow? But I mean, that's just one part of what they did. First of all, and
I took at the time, maybe just because I was from this area, was used to art and stuff, very much a sort of a performance arty quality to the way they were being dissolute on stage. This was, they were sort of, like I said, this doomed romantic kind of vibe about them, which was not very hardcore, that's for sure. It was definitely, that aspect was at odds with the scene. They were very druggy, and some of the scene wasn't, but I don't know anybody who didn't like them though.
Yeah, and they have that awesome thing, which I sort of associate a little bit with the stuff that I'm being a little later to coming to any kind of punk and post-punk. I associate a little bit with like the sludgier bands like Killdozer, or just this ability to sound kind of a little drunk and a little slow and a little off in a really good, in a way that they're actually kind of in control of.
They swing,
but exactly.
They swing. Yeah, Killdozer swings too. That's a great underrated band, like playing Killdozer. But I think Flipper is too. The drummer's fantastic, and he's in the pocket. He always is grooving. And both those guys could come up with really cool bass lines that worked with that. And the heart of that band was those catchy bass lines and that drum blocking in and rocking back and forth between a couple of parts. And then Falcone's just grinding over the top. And it's like, why would you stop? Like, you could do that for hours.
Right.
Just on and on. It's great. And it's like an engine, it's like a song making engine.
Right. There's certain bands, there's not a lot of them can pull it off, this kind of oral illusion where you're like, wow, this is so sloppy and falling over and everything. And then you really listen to it, it's like, no, it's not even,
right.
But they're able to sound like that, the good parts of that, so that it doesn't sound too constrained or too...
They're also a little bit like, they're sort of like a punky underground Steely Dan in a way that they smuggle certain concepts in certain other kinds of Trojan horse things, So inside of the seemingly sloppy punk, anti-punk thing is like this really well thought out lyricism and this particular groove that they're always working with, that's very distinctive in their voice, The guitar that always sounds gnarly, but somehow is never really truly out of tune and always nailing it, And it's very cool. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's fun to watch a band kind of in their prime kind of get that juggling act right.
Yeah, totally. And I think, I mean, for me, because I never saw them live and I've only kind of been able to relate to them through their records, it's also kind of corresponding in their art. Their art is all kind of scrawly and a little slot. It's kind of thing you think, oh, this might be somebody sketching of what they might want to come up with, but that is the art. It's not it's not a sketch.
That flipper fish, yeah, I used to draw that everywhere. That fish, I should get that tattooed on me. That's hilarious. That fish. It's deceptive. That's like really good branding. That fish.
Right.
One scene, never forgotten. Easy for anybody to draw. It's a one-line drawing.
Yep.
Yes. And so like when I was in high school, I would draw that with a Sharpie on everything. Like just go it takes like 2 seconds.
Right.
So I imagine that's like very clever.
Yeah, and I just love that even on the generic record, which is supposed to be literally a generic record, they're still got the little fish logo up in the corner.
Yeah, they're branding.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, even on this single, like at least the version that I've found on Discogs, because you actually have a copy of this, or?
Oh, I have a reissue of it. I didn't have I have the old lady that swallowed the fly single. I have one of those.
Oh, nice. But on the back cover, they just sort of have drawn these kind of stick figures, and
they had a very distinctive. It's a very distinctive visual thing. Even the generic thing that I mean, it's been a little diluted over time, but that was pretty amazing. Like I was like, boing at the time, nobody had done that.
Right.
They were the first ones to the generic thing, and then PIL copied them. Right.
Yeah, I think the way I first heard about Flipper was when the PIL generic album came out, and I read somewhere that like Flipper people are saying that they ripped off Flipper by doing this. Not that it's not a concept that someone couldn't have come up with otherwise, but
no, they ripped off Flipper for sure. I mean, it's not that big a deal, but come on.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It was interesting though, because Flipper did it, which is they're generic. If you look at it, is actually they're referring to generic medication,
right? Because there's like a prescription on the inside,
prescription pad on the inside, and stuff like that. So whereas the PIL one looks like it's more about generic products,
and it has a very much of a logo thing where the generic Flipper doesn't. But
that's a great cover, actually. That would.
Yeah,
the PIL thing, but
yeah, it is. Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, and then Flipper had an album called Public Flipper Limited, which
that was. Yes.
Were there any bands at the time, sort of in the envelope of what they were doing in the 80s, that you think were like them at all?
Well, I mean, Half Japanese comes to mind.
Right.
Just plowing their own furrow. Giza X and the Mommy Man. I mean, Flipper was. They were with Black Flag. They were, they were in that milieu. Dead Kennedys. I think they were friendly with them. And they fit in with all of those bands, I think. Black Flag always did, they started going pretty sludgy pretty early.
That's true. Yeah.
But no, they stood out for playing a little slower, but when everybody went fast, they went slow. It was smart,
Yeah. Do you think they had much of an influence later? I mean,
come on.
I didn't mean to frame that as if they didn't, but
I mean, certainly among our generation, my generation, your generation, among musicians that heard them, they were immediate influence. The combination of being semi-ornery and smart and romantic and fucked up and going your own way is appealing to everybody. And then when you manage to write catchy, meaningful songs on top of it, it's really impressive. I mean, I don't know that especially their original run, there's not a bad Flipper song. Like there's every single song they did was fantastic.
And it's funny that David Yao is singing for them now or recently, because I think there's definitely a line between them and Scratch Acid and Jesus Lizard in terms of sound for sure. And
Scratch Acid were probably huge Flipper fans. Without a doubt.
It seems like it'd have to be. Yeah, everything centered around the bass and.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's a great example. And putting
Yeah.
the tunefulness in the bass instead of on the guitars is definitely
Right.
the flipper, sort of the flipper mark,
Right.
you know.
Mhm.
And I know that I'm not. A lot of people are like, "Oh, wait, if you just put a good rhythm section playing catchy, you can do anything over the top of that."
Uh-huh.
And so they kind of got that from PIL and Gang of Four. Like John Lydon would be like, "Well, you guys took your whole sound. They take
Right.
entire bass lines from Joy Division and rewrite them. Like the sound, the rhythm, and the noise is a Joy Division song, you know." And so they weren't shy about ripping people off.
Right. Right.
They found their own way to do it though, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
They were all in foundational San Francisco punk bands as well, which were some of those bands were really gnarly,
Uh-huh.
you know, and the early San Francisco punk scene with crime and all that kind of stuff is
Right. Yeah. A scene that's not documented enough, it doesn't seem like, in a way.
no. It was Will Shatter was in a band called Negative Trend that was really good.
Right. The 33 1/3 on Fresh Fruit is actually one of the better ones, and it really kind of gives a good sense of what the scene was like around that time.
It's insane.
Yeah.
Those people were
Totally.
insane.
Yeah.
They were out of their minds. It's like the LA thing too. When you read those
Right.
scenes, they're like, "Well, those people are nuts. What do you want?"
Yeah.
I think the San Francisco people sometimes had it a little more together.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Those bands was the Avengers and those early San Francisco bands.
I was going to say, do you think these are their best two songs? But they had so many good songs.
Their best two. So, well, ha ha
yeah.
ha! I adore. They'd be up there for me. Both of those.
Right. Yeah, and they really the repeat listening things really work on those songs. Like the more I listened to them today, the better they got.
That's the conundrum. That's the flipper conundrum. Like you're saying, you know, initially you listen to them and they sound like a big sloppy mess, and then the next time you listen to them, you're like, wait a second.
Right.
And then after a while, you're hooked. The combination of the lyrics and the music, and the way that the tension between the lyrics and the music is what gets flipper over. Like, you know, those are poetic, very poetic lyrics with this absolutely dunderheaded music.
Right.
And it's the friction is just, you know, it's too much to bear. It's
yeah, and they're able to sort of embody those contradictions like at the same time.
Right.
Pretty awesome. Yeah. So, awesome. Okay, cool. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Spindle.
All right, cheers.
Yeah. The Spindle is produced by John Howard and me, Marc Masters. I'm also the audio editor. Our theme song is by the great band Honey Radar. Our podcast is brought to you by WASTOIDS, audio and video from Hello Merch. Find more podcasts and videos at wastoids.com. And please leave a rating and a review of our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks.